I really wanted to talk to you this week, Pat, because I just came back from the NAFI Summit, the National Association of Flight Instructors, and it was great. Flight instructors and flight school owners from all around the country, they come together. It was a remarkable event, lots to learn, lots of people to talk to. But the thing that really caught my attention, the unsatisfactory rate, what most people call the failure rate on check rides, is now very near 50%. And that doesn't have to be so. You're a designated pilot examiner in Houston. Are you seeing anything like that?
Well, the answer is yes and no. Um, I did a kind of a self analysis of all of the check rides I've done over the summer and into the fall. And there was a period of time, about a 2.5 month period of time there, that my first time pass rate was 50%, actually a little less than 50%.
Mm.
And what that means is that now I've got to find some time to go back and finish those applicants up. Usually I can do that, but sometimes the only opportunity I have is to take a day that ordinarily I would do a full check ride and finish up a couple of people, which essentially takes up most of the day. There's a limited number of activities that I can accomplish as a DPE on a daily basis. For example, the guidance for us is that we can do 2 full check rides and a finish up,
Hmm.
for example. Now I've never had another combination of those, but that's all we can do.
Yeah, and beyond the time commitment for you, one of the things that really sticks in my mind, because I think back to when I went through this, failing a check ride is an expensive proposition. Because not only are you paying the DPE, because if all you do is show up and you don't have the paperwork and that's an unsatisfactory, you still owe the DPE. Plus, you rented the airplane, plus, you had the day off from work or doing whatever. There's a lot that goes into this, and your frustration level and disappointment level skyrockets through that. I
Yeah.
think we could talk about this, Pat, from two different perspectives. What can the applicant do to increase the likelihood of being successful on the check ride?
Right.
And what can the CFI do to best prepare their students? So rather than moan and groan about, oh my goodness, a 50% failure rate, let's talk proactively about what the applicant can do to make sure they get through the ride successfully. And, a big part of that is just the presentation of material at the oral. Are you actually qualified to take the ride?
Right. Right. You know, we talked about this before you pushed the go button on here, but that book right there, even though this is the private, all of the ACSs and even the PTSs that are still out there, they all have a page in here with a checklist of things that you need to make sure that you do. You can argue whether or not it's a comprehensive checklist, but it is a checklist.
Mhm.
Um, when I sit down with an applicant, let's talk about this from the applicant standpoint, as you want to, as you mentioned earlier. When I sit down with an applicant, we get acquainted. We spend 5 or 10 minutes talking and asking about his family or her family or whatever, how they got interested in flying. But then we have to qualify the applicant. So the first thing that I'm looking for is a photo ID, their medical, and their student pilot certificate, or their pilot certificate if they're higher, private or higher. And I'm looking to see if the medical has an original signature on it. And I can laminate the medical if they want, but it has to be signed first. I had to turn down a check right a while back because that guy showed up with a laminated medical and he hadn't signed it yet. He said, "Well, can I sign it with a Sharpie?" Sorry, not my rules. No, you can't. And so he was able to. We were able to get the ride in. It's a long story as to how, but we were able to get the ride in that day. But it took 2 hours to get all of that straightened out. And imagine his stress level.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's the thing. You're not, we always tell people to relax and breathe deep and everything, but I've never gone on a check ride where I didn't have a certain amount of anxiety.
there's always
That's just
anxiety.
normal. And there's so many little details. You talk about the medical. I've actually met a couple people who showed up for their practical and they passed their knowledge test 25 months ago.
Yeah.
Just knowing something like that, that you've got a 24-month window,
Yeah.
and if you're not going to meet it, you've got to retake it, unfortunately.
Well, there's even more nuances, if you will. Um, has the applicant signed the back of his student pilot certificate or his other pilot certificates? If he hasn't signed the back of the certificate, it's not valid. Now that's easy to fix. Just give it to him and let him sign it. But that's indicative of just lack of attention to details. then and then once we've qualified the applicant just from that standpoint, now we have to go to the logbook,
Hmm.
and I need to see an endorsement for the pre-solo test. Just the informal written test that's given before they're allowed to solo. I need to see an endorsement for the FAA knowledge test. And it can be if they do an online course like King or M0A or something like that, that's okay. That's perfectly fine. I need to see a current solo endorsement because 6147 says that they are pilot in command. I'm talking specifically
Hmm.
now for a private check ride, but 6147 says, you are pilot in command. You, Mr. Applicant, are pilot in command. I need to see an endorsement that says they're prepared for the test, for the practical test. I need to see an endorsement that says that the instructor has gone over the deficiencies in the knowledge test. I need to see an endorsement that says that they've had 3 hours of check ride prep in the preceding 2 calendar months. And some logbooks, have pre-printed endorsements in the back, right?
Yeah, I have
Awesome.
those.
Awesome, except some of them, depending on how old they are, say the 3 hours check ride prep in the preceding 60 days.
Yeah.
And that's not right. Now, if the instructor's sharp and crosses it out and put 2 calendar months, I'm fine with that. But the applicant should be familiar with that just as well as the instructor should. This is Advisory Circular 61-65H, which has all of the endorsements. I think the only one missing may be the TSA endorsement.
Well, I'll
But
tell you, I remember being a student and somebody told me about that advisory circular, and my little study group, we pulled it out and went over it. And we started out with, why do we need to know this?
mhm,
But it actually does matter. I think I've told you this story before, but I inherited a student once, many, many years ago. And he told me, I'm all set for my check ride. I finished up with my other instructor and I moved and I need to get set. And I start reviewing his logbook, and the solo endorsement is okay to solo, signature, certificate number, date. No aircraft type, no weather restrictions, no nothing. And that really set off the spidey sense. This isn't a legitimate sign off. And
yeah,
sure enough, we went flying, and he was horrible. He had just tried to fake his way through it.
yeah,
But there's no secrets here. The information available to the CFI is equally available to the applicant. They
right,
can check and make sure they're in good shape. Everybody, if you're part 61, we all focus on the 40 hours and the 20 hours and the 10 hours, which
yeah,
is probably not going to happen. We're probably going to go over that.
yeah,
But we don't pay attention to the 3 hours cross country, or the 3 hours of night flight training, or the 10 takeoffs and landings. And those numbers are specific for a reason. And if you've got 9 landings, or you've got 2.8 hours, you don't qualify. So that's one of those things. A student can sit down with their logbook well before they go. They can sit down with their logbook and a scrap of paper or a calculator and verify every one of those. And as you say, there's a checklist. It's all written out. You don't have to figure it out. Just
yeah.
go read it and see, do I actually have this?
Yeah, after all of the logbook endorsements and the IDs and all of that stuff we talked about, that's the next thing that I look at is the actual logbook entries. Now, typically what I'll do, and I suspect that most DPEs will, they'll go to the very last page of the logbook that's got entries in it, and hopefully the student has brought all of the previous entries forward, and they're down at the bottom. And I don't pay too much attention to the entries on that particular page, but I'm looking at the numbers on the very bottom of the logbook. and I'm looking for the minimum of 40 hours and the 20 hours dual and the 5 hours solo cross country and all and the nighttime, all that stuff. Again, I'm speaking specifically about private right now, but it applies to all of it. And I'm looking very for those numbers. As long as those numbers are equal or greater than the requirements, okay, I can check that stuff off on my checklist. But then I go back and I'll say, okay, let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at your night landings. Can you show me where they are? And there's usually one or two or three maybe during the night cross country, or how about your landings at a towered field and those kind of things. And they'll go back and they can show me the individual logbook line item entries for that, which is great. But sometimes they don't really have the logbook tabbed, and so they're going through. Oh, wait a minute. Oh no, that's not it. It's oh, there it is. Oh no, wait a minute. And I mean, okay, but look, it's just additional time.
Hmm.
And if you want to get through your oil quickly, then let's get these details out of the way so that we can actually get it started. And here's something too. I'm seeing more and more applicants come to me using ForeFlight as their electronic logbook. ForeFlight automatically categorizes this stuff and puts out a summary sheet that says, it'll say the 40 hours, but below that, it'll say how many hours they actually have, or the 20 hours and how many they actually have, and so on. So the regs the requirements are listed there, and then how many hours they've got is actually is listed under there. Problem is, that's not sufficient. I'll take the numbers and I'll look at them and I'll check off the ones that 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 I'm satisfied with, but I still want to see that long cross country because I want to make sure that it is in fact more than 150 nautical miles or whatever the requirement is, no less
Hmm.
than 300 in a commercial, for example, 250 for instrument. And I want to make sure that it does in fact meet the requirement. There have been times, not too many, thank goodness, where I've gone into ForeFlight and actually um, put in that cross country and found out that it's a mile or two short.
Not
So
unheard of. It
no,
happens.
no, and in fact, I've had and again, thankfully, not very many, where one leg of the cross country, which has got to be more than 50 nautical miles, ForeFlight calls it 50.
Hmm.
It's rounds it down. It rounds down, and so I've had to go to other sources like AirNav or some other places and put in the similar, those waypoints so that I can hang my hat legitimately on the fact that it was more than 50 nautical miles. 50.1 is more than 50. That's okay. But the question is that I asked the instructor at that point is, why are you cutting it that close?
Exactly. Well, and this all comes down to mindset for me, because when that applicant goes in, they are going to be a little anxious. They're going to be a little nervous. Finding things in the logbook is going to be a little harder than it was at your kitchen table because your mind's racing. There's so much going on that if you're not on top of this stuff, if you're not confident it's filled out correctly and you can find the information, that ratchets up your anxiety level and that increases the chances that you don't do well in the oral or on
Yeah,
the flight. So
yeah,
it's all connected. But I think we can agree that the applicant does have a great amount of input into how well this goes. And part of that is just being able to see yourself as PIC. When you do that first 5 hours of flight training, yeah, your CFI is holding your hand for everything and you're letting them because
right.
you don't really know what you're doing. But as you come up towards the end, you really should be shifting into a PIC mindset where that CFI is now a resource, but I know how to make my own decisions. I know how to do things myself. And, I used to tell people, Pat, when I was an active full time instructor, when we start, you're going to think I'm the greatest pilot in the world. I'm not. I'm safe. I know what I'm doing, but I'm just a CFI. At the end, I'm the biggest pain in the ass you ever met because I'm tweaking your directional gyro, just messing with things. I'm creating distractions because I have to know you can handle them. But part of that was because I want them to actively start thinking as I'm PIC. So when they go into that check ride, they're not thinking in the back of their head, oh, I wish Jamie was here because I can't remember the answer to this.
Yeah, yes, and I think that's excellent advice and a good warning for the student to of what to expect as the relationship evolves. Once we've qualified the pilot, the applicant, now we got to qualify the airplane.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you what, I can't tell you the number of times I have walked into a check ride and the books are all there, and I say, okay, show me that the airplane is airworthy, and I swear it's the first time the applicant's ever looked at the logbooks. In fact, there have been a number of times I've said, "Hey, did you look at these before we came?" "Oh yeah, yeah. Me and my instructor went over it, 2 weeks ago." "Oh,
You
2 weeks
know,
ago."
there's a thing we did in 141 schools where we have stage checks.
Yep.
And I fly with your students and you fly with my students just to see, did Pat miss anything? Did Jamie not notice this? I'm going to throw out a crazy idea. I think it might be worth any applicant investing the 50 or $100 to do a mock oral and check ride with another instructor
Right.
before they actually go on their check ride. Now they've been through it. It's not such a mystery because your instructor's been through a few check rides. They know what the process is.
Right.
But to go into it the first time, not sure you're prepared, a little anxious about it, plus this total stranger, Pat Brown, very mean man. I think you can tell by looking at him, very mean man. And all of a sudden they start peppering you with questions and let me see these documents and whatever. It's not a casual day, but it is a very expensive day. So do what you can to prepare yourself and take this advice to heart. It's better to invest an extra day or two checking out your numbers. It's better to invest 50 or $100 in a mock check ride with an actual uh, instructor or assistant chief than it is to go into your actual check ride where you could easily spend $1,000 that day
Yeah.
and not really be sure how you're going to do on this.
I agree with you with regard to the mock check ride. I've got a couple of friends that are instructors here. They're good personal friends, and they've each sent me students. And by the way, the friendship has nothing to do with the pass rate because
Yeah.
they live or die on their own merit. But they will often do mock check rides for each other's students before they get ready to send them to me or whoever they send them to. And I think that is an excellent idea. There's no way that you can absolutely replicate the stress level of having an examiner in the seat with you. But if you have a stranger that you really haven't flown with before, or even if somebody that maybe you know a little bit, but you've never flown with them before, that's fairly close to being able to replicate the stress of having the examiner in the seat with you. Even though we're on their side, we're really we want them to pass. We don't want to be a part of that 50% fail rate. But
Yeah,
it
and the stress of being unsure makes it worse. One of the kids I work with recently did not complete their first try at a private pilot successfully because they planned the cross country, but their route went right through a restricted area.
oh
And they were so nervous, they didn't recognize it as a restricted area in the oral, the Q&A, they never said, well, if it's hot, we'll go around and that's just, you can't do that. So that was
yeah,
an unsatisfactory, but that was just nerves. That was
yeah.
just, he hadn't really gone through the full process. And he did pass on the second attempt. He did a great job and I'm really proud of him. But that's the thing. It's all connected.
One of my good buddies is he's a CFII now, but he was telling me a long time ago that when he took his private pilot check ride, he busted the oral because he went blank on airspace, and as the examiner was filling out the unsat, that's what we call them unsats, the notice of disapproval, they were just chatting casually, and my buddy starts coming up with all this airspace stuff that he had frozen up
Yep.
on during the real thing.
Yeah, the reason I think it's important we talk about this, Pat, and I think we should do another one of these from the CFI perspective,
I agree.
but the applicants got an awful lot invested in this time, money, effort, drive, initiative. I think we can come away with this that the applicant has a lot to do with how well they do. And with a failure rate that's near 50%, and I know y'all don't say failure, you say unsatisfactory, but
Yeah.
when you're getting up to that level, it's imperative that we talk to folks about you have control over this. It's your check ride, it's your flight training. You have to get up to speed and start thinking like PIC and taking control of the situation. And if you do that, your chances of success go way up because DPEs aren't looking for perfect, they're looking for PIC decision making.
Yep. I think that's great. You said it better than I could have.
No, then we're done. Let's go to the beach.
Adios.
Pat, thanks so much. It's always good talking to you. I have the best time. I hope we shared enough good information that people click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and maybe leave a comment about their own flight check experience,
Yeah.
good or bad.
Awesome.
I'll see you next time, buddy.
Later.